Hello dear students. Today we are going to discuss an important topic, ecosystem. In this lecture we will discuss the meaning of ecosystem, classification of ecosystem, components of ecosystem and ecological pyramids. Dear students, we will begin with a brief introduction on ecosystem. The term ecosystem was coined by E.G. Tansley and is derived from a Greek word eco, meaning environment, and system, meaning an interacting and interdependent complex. It includes not only the biotic community of organisms in an area, but also the whole complex of physical factors forming the abiotic environment around the community. According to Odum, ecosystem is the basic functional unit of the organisms and their environment, interacting with each other and their own components. Ecosystem is the basic structural and functional unit of biosphere, comprising of living organisms and their non-living environment that interact with each other by means of material cycling and energy flow. The relationship between biotic community and non-living environment is a mutual one. That is, not only does the environment affect the community, but the community also modifies the environment. This means that living organisms and the non-living environment are inseparably interrelated and interact with each other. Ecosystems differ greatly in their composition, the number of species, kind of species, the kind and the relative proportion of the non-biological constituents, and the degree of variation in time and space. Thus, the term ecosystem can be applied to areas on Earth that differ greatly in size from smallest puddle of water to a large forest or ocean. Now, coming to characteristics of ecosystem. The ecosystem is a major structural and functional unit of ecology. The structure of an ecosystem is related to its species diversity in the sense that complex ecosystems have high species diversity. Ecosystem is not an isolated or closed unit, as is often held. Instead, it is an open system and there is continuous but variable loss of influx of materials and energy. The relative amount of energy needed to maintain an ecosystem depends on its structure. Complex ecosystems need less energy to maintain themselves. Young ecosystems develop and change from less complex to more complex ecosystems through the process called as succession. Each ecosystem has its own energy budget which cannot be exceeded. Adaptations to local environmental conditions is the important feature of biotic components of an ecosystem, failing which they might perish. Now coming to kinds of ecosystem. Ecosystem may be classified differently on the basis of duration, nature, size, etc. Based on the duration, an ecosystem may be temporary, such as rain-fed pond, or a laboratory culture of microorganisms, or permanent, such as forests or a lake. Rivers make limnitic, whereas lakes make lotic ecosystem. An area of wet soil, plants and air constitute a semi-terrestrial ecosystem, whereas systems of aerated soil and plants make a terrestrial ecosystem. An ecosystem has no size limit. It may be very small, making a micro-ecosystem, such as a single flower pot or the site under a small stone. Forests make a macro-ecosystem and cold deciduous forests make a meso-ecosystem. An ecosystem directly affected by humans is the noosphere. Now, functions of ecosystem. The function of ecosystem is related to the flow of energy and material cycling through the structural components of the ecosystem. It includes the rate of biological energy flow, the rate of nutrient cycle, and biological or ecological regulations. Dear students, we will now discuss the components of ecosystem. The necessary components of an ecosystem are matter, that is water, minerals, carbon dioxide, etc., and several species of organisms. Thus, every ecosystem has abiotic and biotic components. Abiotic components include non-living physico-chemical factors of environment. It includes inorganic substances, organic compounds, and physical environment. Inorganic substances such as carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, water, etc. occur either in the form of compounds dissolved in water, in soil, or in free state. The amount of inorganic substances present at any given time in an ecosystem is known as standing state or standing quality of an ecosystem. Organic compounds present in an ecosystem include carbohydrates, proteins, amino acids, lipids, etc., which mainly occur as the byproducts of organic activity or death. Physical environment includes climatic factors such as light, temperature, rainfall, atmospheric gases, etc., and edaphic factors such as soil, topography, minerals, etc. Now coming to biotic components. The living components present in an ecosystem form the biotic components. They are interconnected through food as matter and energy are transferred in the living world as food. Regarding the mode of obtaining food, organisms occur in an ecosystem are classified into autotrophs, that is self-nourishing, and heterotrophs, that is other nourishing. Autotrophic components, also known as producers, fix the light energy, use simple inorganic substances and build up complex substances. Autotrophs are of two types, photoautotrophs and chemoautotrophs. Photoautotrophs include all photosynthetic organisms, green plants, algae, and photosynthetic bacteria such as green sulfur bacteria. Photoautotrophs, with the help of chlorophyll, entrap the radiant energy of the sun in the photosynthetic process, whereby carbon dioxide is assimilated and light energy is converted into chemical energy. Chemoautotrophs. Producers also include chemosynthetic bacteria, all of which obtain energy by oxidizing simple organic compounds. They actually capture energy released during certain inorganic chemical reactions and prepare organic food with it. Some of the examples of chemosynthetic bacteria are colorless sulfur bacteria, iron bacteria, and nitrifying bacteria. Now coming to heterotrophs. The members of this group cannot produce their own food. They consume the matter built by producers and are therefore called as consumers. Primary consumers. These are purely herbivorous animals that are dependent for their food on green plants. Insects, rodents, deer, cow, etc. are some common herbivores in terrestrial ecosystem. And small crustaceans, mollusks, tadpoles, and tortoises are the common herbivores in aquatic ecosystem. The herbivores of the ecosystem are known as key industry animals because they convert plant material into animal material. Plants that are parasites on other plants and bacteria, protists and fungi, which flourish on living plants, are also included in primary consumers. Secondary consumers. These are the animals that feed on herbivores. They may either be carnivores or omnivores. Tertiary consumers. Tertiary consumers are largest carnivores, also known as top carnivores, which prey upon the carnivores, omnivores, and herbivores. They are not eaten by other animals and include tigers, lions, whales, etc. Primary, secondary, and tertiary consumers are collectively called as macroconsumers. They are all phagotrophs, that is, they eat or ingest food through their mouth. Decomposers, also known as saprotrophs, derived from the Greek word sapros meaning rotten and trophs meaning nourishment. They include bacteria and fungi of decay. They obtain their food from the organic materials of dead producers, consumers, and their waste products. Decomposers break down the dead remains of organisms and degrade the complex organic substances into simpler organic and inorganic compounds. The simpler organic compounds are utilized by themselves as food, and the inorganic compounds are released into the environment that are suitable for the reuse by producers. Now we'll talk about the energy flow. Energy flow occurs in non-cyclic manner, that is unidirectional from the sun to decomposers via producers and macro consumers. Ecological energetics includes quantity of solar energy reaching an ecosystem, quantity of energy used by green plants for photosynthesis, and the quantity and the path of energy from producers to consumers. Living organisms can use energy in several forms, with radiant and fixed energy. When the radiant energy falls on green surface of the plants, part of it is transformed into chemicals energy stored in various organic products in the plant. Only about 3% of the light energy striking the green parts is converted into chemical energy of the organic food. Rest is dissipated as heat. Loss of energy is due to the operation of second law of thermodynamics, which states that there is never 100% conversion of energy, and whenever energy is transformed from one form to another, there is a decrease in the amount of useful energy, as a part of energy is lost as unusable heat. When the herbivores consume plants as food and convert chemical energy accumulated in plant products into kinetic energy, degradation of energy will occur through its conversion into heat. And when these herbivores are consumed by carnivores of first order, further degradation will occur. Similarly, when primary carnivores are consumed by top carnivores, again energy will be degraded. Finally, the dead animals and the plants are decomposed. Eventually, whole of the energy originally entrapped in plants by photosynthesis is converted into heat and lost. Dear students, we will now discuss about food chains. The sequential interlinking of organisms involving the transfer of food energy with repeated eating and being eaten is referred to as food chain. Thus, food chain is a series of organisms, each feeding on the organism preceding it. The distinct sequential steps in a straight food chain are referred to as trophic levels or nutritional or feeding levels. For instance, producers, that is green plants, stand for first trophic level, the primary consumers, that is herbivores, for second trophic level, and the secondary consumers, that is carnivores, represent the third trophic level. Now, types of food chain. In nature, generally two types of food chains are distinguished, namely grazing food chain and detritus food chain. First, let us discuss grazing food chain. This type of food chain starts from living green plants and ends with carnivores passing through herbivores. The grazing food chains are directly dependent on influx of solar radiations. These are longer food chains and these always end at decomposer level. Most of the ecosystems in nature follow this type of food chain. The common examples of grazing food chains are those of grasslands ecosystems starting from autotrophs, moving to herbivores, to primary carnivores, to secondary carnivores, and finally ending at top carnivores. Now coming to detritus food chain. This type of food chain starts from dead organic matter, that is detritus, goes to microorganisms, then finally to the organisms feeding on detritus and their predators. Unlike grazing food chains, the detritus food chain depend on influx of dead organic matter. Hence, these are not directly dependent on the solar energy. The dead organic matter, that is detritus, is first eaten by decomposers such as bacteria, protozoans, fungi, etc. and are designated as primary consumers or detrivores in this type of food chain. The detrivores are in turn eaten by their predators like insects, larvae, nematodes, etc. The main function of the detrivores is to release the inorganic elements into the ecosystem by decomposing the dead organic matter. As compared to grazing food chains, the detritus food chains are generally shorter. Now, ecological principles of food chains. To be complete and self-containing, a food chain must always begin with photosynthesis and end with decay. The shorter a food chain, the more efficient it is, the more trophic levels it has, the greater will be the wastage of energy. The size of any population is ultimately determined by the number of trophic levels in a food chain. With the decrease in the useful energy at each step, very little energy is available for the population of quaternary consumers. In any food chain, the successive members are larger in size, though fewer in number. Now, we'll discuss about food web. A complex of interlinking food chains makes up food web. Precisely, food web is a network of food chains which becomes interconnected at various trophic levels so as to form a number of feeding connections amongst different organisms of a biotic community. One organism does not depend wholly on another particular organism. The resources are shared especially at the beginning of the chain. For example, in a grassland food chain, grass is eaten by mouse, a mouse by snake, which in turn forms food for owls. However, grass may alternatively be eaten by grazing cattle and, in absence of grazing cattle, by rabbits or by mice. Sometimes mice are not eaten by snakes but directly by owls, and snakes may be eaten by peacocks or mongoose instead of owls. To sum up, alternatives are available which result in interlocking of food chains, and any given species may operate simultaneously at more than one trophic level. Now, characteristics of food web. Unlike food chains, food webs are never straight. They provide alternative pathways of food availability and help in checking the overpopulation of highly fecundative species of plants and animals. Now, let's discuss types of food chains in a food web. There are three types of food chains in a food web: predator food chain, parasitic food chain, and saprophytic or detritus food chain. Predator food chains begin with plants, that is, producers, and proceed from small to large animals. Parasitic food chains proceed from large to small organisms. Saprophytic or detritus food chains proceed from dead animals to microorganisms. Ecological pyramids. As we know, a food chain in an ecosystem has several trophic levels at each step in the food chain. A considerable portion of energy is lost as heat. As a result, the organisms in each trophic level pass on lesser energy to the next trophic level than they actually receive. And biomass at each level is about 1/10 than that at the preceding trophic level. It means that starting from the producers, one finds a regular decrease in the properties and characteristics such as number, biomass, and energy. Longer the food chain, lesser is the energy available for the last trophic level. When such a phenomenon is represented graphically, these relations assume the shape of a pyramid with a broad base and a tapering apex. Such pyramids are known as ecological pyramids. Precisely, an ecological pyramid may be defined as a graphical representation of the number, biomass, or accumulated energy at different levels in a food chain in an ecosystem. Ecological pyramids are also termed as Eltonian pyramids because this idea was developed by Charles Elton in year 1927. Types of ecological pyramids. Ecological pyramids are of three types, viz. Pyramid of number, pyramid of biomass, and pyramid of energy. Pyramid of number is a geographical representation depicting the arrangement of number of individuals of different trophic levels in a food chain in an ecosystem. The pyramid of number may be upright or inverted, depending upon whether the producer individuals are greater in number, for example, phytoplanktons in aquatic ecosystems, or lesser in number, for example, an oak tree in a parasitic food chain. Generally, the pyramid of number is upright in predatory food chains, as in grassland ecosystem or pond ecosystem. However, in case of parasitic food chains, the pyramid of number is always inverted. Now, pyramid of biomass. It is a graphical representation of biomass, that is, total amount of living or organic matter in an ecosystem at any time present per unit area in different trophic levels. Pyramid of biomass is upright in grassland and forest ecosystem, as there is gradual decrease in biomass of organisms at successive trophic levels from producers onwards to top carnivores. However, in the pond ecosystem, on the other hand, producers are the smallest organisms while carnivores are the largest in size. Consequently, there is a gradual increase in biomass of organisms at successive trophic levels, resulting in inverted pyramids. Lastly, pyramid of energy. It is the graphical representation of amount of energy per unit area in different trophic levels of a food chain. The pyramid of energy gives the best picture of overall nature of an ecosystem and shows the amount of total energy utilized by organisms at each trophic level of food chain. As there is always gradual decrease in energy content at successive trophic levels from producers to various consumers, therefore the pyramid of energy is always upright in all ecosystems. So friends, I hope you might have understood the topic ecosystem, its classification, meaning and components. See you next time with another topic. Till then, goodbye.